The courtroom that day was so stifling that I felt every breath being strangled out of me within those old, oak-paneled walls. The musty scent of aged furniture mixed with the dry, frigid air blasting from a rattling HVAC unit that hadn't been serviced in years. It all coalesced into a thick, heavy atmosphere that made my head spin while a sharp, endless ringing echoed in my ears. It was the lingering side effect of the heavy doses of antidepressants I had been relying on just to survive these past months. They draped a frosted glass over my view of the world. Everything felt slow, distorted, and distant, as if I were trapped in a dream I couldn't wake up from. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting on my knees, yet I couldn't feel my own physical presence. My vacant eyes stared straight ahead at the man who used to be my husband, Jason. His head was bowed, his shoulders trembling slightly, as if he were bearing some unimaginable grief. His faded gray dress shirt made him look all the more pitiful. His usually neat hair was disheveled, and his bloodshot eyes were brimming with tears. Together it painted the perfect picture of a tragic, devoted father trying to hold his family together after his wife suffered a mental breakdown over their missing daughter. It was a flawless image, one that easily convinced everyone in that room, even the strangers sitting in the gallery. The judge's voice rang out deep and clinical, each word dropping like a hammer against my eardrums. Noting the mother's current unstable psychological condition, coupled with the fact that the daughter's disappearance 6 months ago had caused her to cease functioning in society, the court ruled that the mother was temporarily unfit both financially and mentally to care for a minor. Therefore, full custody of the 6-year-old boy would be awarded to the father. Those words tore away whatever last shred of humanity I had left inside me. But strangely, I didn't cry. I didn't react. I just felt a terrifying hollowness, as if all my emotions had been drained dry a long time ago. The judge raised his gavel, preparing to strike it and adjourn the hearing. That moment felt like the final period at the end of my life, the end of my marriage, my family, and the last desperate hope I had clung to for half a year. But right at that second, a clear, innocent child's voice broke the silence, freezing the entire room. "Excuse me, sir. If I go live with Dad, who is the little sister in the freezer going to live with?" The courtroom went dead silent. I felt my heart stop for a full second, before it started hammering so violently against my ribs that it physically hurt. The thick fog in my brain shattered as if struck by a baseball bat. Everything became ruthlessly clear. I turned my head to look at my 6-year-old son, Noah. He stood there, his eyes exact replicas of my own, clear but full of confusion. There was no fear in him, only a terrifying innocence as he uttered a sentence that no one in this room dared to believe was real. I didn't scream. I didn't lunge forward. I didn't do anything you see in the movies. A pain that massive doesn't allow a human body to react normally. It only made my entire body cramp as if I were being crushed from the inside out. My throat turned rigid, my stomach knotted so violently that I doubled over and vomited bitter bile right there on the floor. I looked over at Jason. All the blood had drained from his face. He was as white as a sheet of paper. His pupils had contracted into pinpricks. His trembling hand instinctively knocked over the stainless steel Yeti tumbler on his desk. The water spilled dripping onto the hardwood floor, each drop echoing loudly in the horrifying silence. His lawyer scrambled to his feet, stuttering an explanation that the child was psychologically traumatized and speaking nonsense. But even the attorney couldn't hide the panic in his own gestures. The judge didn't say another word. He simply hit a button on his bench to summon the bailiffs, his voice ice cold, as he ordered the room locked down and requested homicide detectives immediately. I sat there completely numb, only feeling a cold chill run down my spine as if someone had just opened a door leading straight to hell. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the back of an unmarked police cruiser next to lead detective Carter, a middle-aged man with eyes as sharp as scalpels. He hadn't wanted me to come, but I had bitten my own hand so hard it bled, forcing him to bring me to the place I instinctively knew would completely destroy my life. The cruiser pulled up to an old, run-down industrial park on the south side of the city, stopping in front of a detached garage Jason had bought before we were even married. It was damp, dark, and practically abandoned. The rusted roll-up metal door was shoved open, the screeching sound of metal tearing through the cold air. The smell of motor oil, mildew, and an indescribable metallic stench assaulted my nose, making me nauseous. In the deepest corner of the garage sat an old chest freezer. It was still plugged in, emitting a low, guttural hum like the whisper of something that didn't belong to the living world. Carter pulled on a pair of latex gloves and looked back at me, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He told me to turn away because what I was about to see would be unbearable, but I couldn't turn away. I knew that inside that freezer was likely all that was left of my daughter. The lid was pried open. A cloud of white freezing vapor spilled out like a captive soul finally being released. And then I saw it. A yellow sundress. A tiny body curled up in the frost. A child. My daughter. The world inside me completely collapsed. Sound vanished. Color faded. There was only that single image burning into my mind like a fire that would never be extinguished. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just fell to my knees, hitting the freezing concrete hard. Tears slipped silently down my face without asking for permission. In that moment, I understood that I had lost everything. But also in that moment, something else began to take root inside me. It wasn't pain. It was something colder, deeper. A singular thought. This isn't over. I don't remember how I left that garage. When I finally opened my eyes, I was sitting in an interrogation room at the precinct. The harsh fluorescent lights made everything look sharp and cruel. My hands were trembling uncontrollably in spasms, as if my body was trying to react on behalf of my completely paralyzed consciousness. Carter sat across from me. He didn't speak right away. He gave me time to breathe. But the silence only made hundreds of chaotic noises ring in my head. All of them revolved around one image, the yellow dress and the tiny frozen body. After a while, he slid a paper cup of water toward me. His voice was low, slow, and deliberate, trying to keep things procedural. "I need you to stay calm and answer a few questions." Every detail is critical right now. I nodded, my throat parched, but I forced the words out. Ask me. Over the last 6 months, did you ever suspect your husband? The question made me pause. Not because it was hard to answer, but because it felt too simple compared to what had just happened. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them, my voice completely flat. No, I just thought she wandered off and got lost. I searched everywhere. I printed tens of thousands of flyers. I knocked on doors, reviewed Ring camera footage from every street, every intersection. I didn't have the time or energy to suspect anyone, let alone him. Carter looked at me for a long time, his gaze not just observing, but evaluating every microscopic twitch on my face. Then he asked, "What about this morning before court? Did you notice anything unusual?" I shook my head, but then a tiny detail surfaced, something trivial then, but terrifyingly clear now. He woke up very early this morning. He even made me coffee. That hasn't happened in half a year. He told me he wanted to end things peacefully, told me not to stress. At the time, I just thought he was playing the role of the decent soon-to-be ex-husband. Carter jotted something down quickly, then looked up, his tone hardening. "We are holding Jason for questioning. But you need to prepare yourself. This case might be more complicated than you think." I didn't ask what he meant. By now, I had already begun to understand that my daughter's death wasn't a simple, tragic accident. It was something buried so deeply and meticulously that it had fooled the entire police department for 6 months. The door clicked open, and a uniformed officer stepped in, whispering something into Carter's ear. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the detective's expression shift. He stood up and turned to me. "Stay here for a moment." The door closed again. I sat alone staring at the blank wall, and for the first time since finding my daughter, a crystal-clear string of logic formed in my mind. If Jason were innocent, he wouldn't have looked so utterly terrified when his son asked that question. If he were innocent, he wouldn't have hidden his own child's body in a freezer for half a year. If he were innocent, he wouldn't have rushed to secure full custody of our son right before the truth risked coming out. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms until they nearly broke the skin, but I felt no pain. Because what I was feeling wasn't agony anymore. It was pure, icy clarity. Carter returned about 15 minutes later. He didn't sit down this time. He stood tall across the table, his voice grim. "We've officially detained him." His initial statement is that she suffered a severe acute asthma attack in his car. He claims he panicked, hid the body, and reported her missing to buy himself time. I let out a laugh, a dry, raspy sound that even I didn't recognize as my own. "Do you believe that?" Carter didn't answer immediately. He looked me dead in the eye. "I don't believe it entirely, but right now we don't have the physical evidence to disprove his statement. As for the freezer, he claims he did it because he was terrified of the decomposition." I stayed quiet for a few seconds before asking a very simple question. If my child was dying of an asthma attack, why didn't he call 911 or drive to the ER? Carter didn't reply, but his eyes gave me the answer. The police were asking the exact same thing. Another detective walked in, handing Carter a manila folder. He flipped through a few pages and looked at me. "Your daughter's medical history shows she had a history of severe asthma and allergies, but no prior life-threatening episodes. Furthermore, the preliminary coroner's report shows no signs of mechanical asphyxiation or trauma. What I mean is, forensically, we can't definitively call this a homicide yet." Those words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I knew exactly what that meant. Without concrete proof, Jason could walk away with a lesser charge, maybe just tampering with a corpse. A slap on the wrist compared to what he had actually done. I stood up. My legs were still shaking, but my voice was freakishly steady. "I want to see him." Carter hesitated. "Now isn't the time." "I want to see him." I slowed down, articulating every syllable. It was no longer a request. It was an absolute demand. Carter studied me, then finally nodded. "Fine, but we're going to be right there." The interrogation room was colder than I expected. Jason sat handcuffed to the steel table, yet his expression was much calmer than it had been in the courtroom. When he saw me, he lowered his head, his voice raspy. "I'm so sorry." I stared at him for a long time before asking, "How did she die?" I told them. "She had an asthma attack. Why didn't you take her to the hospital?" He paused for a second before answering. I panicked. "Why did you hide her body? Why were you so desperate to get full custody of Noah?" That question made him flinch. His eyes darted away for a fraction of a second, but he quickly regained his composure. I didn't want him living with a mother who was mentally unstable. I smiled faintly. This time, it wasn't a dry laugh. It was sharp as a razor. "Who exactly do you think you're performing for right now?" Jason didn't answer. But looking closely, I could see the cracks forming behind his calm facade. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Noah told us." That sentence acted like a knife plunging straight into his chest. His pupils dilated and his breathing hitched. In that split second, I knew I had hit his weak spot. He tried to brush it off. Kids talk nonsense." "Then let's see how well you can keep up this act," I whispered. I stood up and walked out without looking back. This war had just begun, and this time I wasn't going to let him win. After leaving the interrogation room, I didn't go home. I sat on a hard plastic chair in the precinct hallway. The dim fluorescent lights cast a sickly glow on the linoleum floor. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, no longer chaotic but slow and steady, like an engine restarting after being broken down for ages. And in that quiet, fragments of memories started to surface. Not through the lens of grief, but logic. Small details began linking together to form a picture my medicated brain had previously been too clouded to see. I remembered that spring afternoon half a year ago. The day Jason said he was going to take our daughter to a family fun center out in the suburbs. I was sitting in the living room holding my phone, calling a friend to help me print more resumes. Since quitting my job to be a stay-at-home mom, I had practically zero income while Jason was always busy at the corporate office, constantly working late. That day, he made a rare, proactive offer to take her out, saying he wanted me to get some rest. I had felt warmed by the gesture. I even reminded him to buy her a yellow sundress she had been begging for. Looking back, it was all a setup. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old text messages. Most were my frantic texts about finding our daughter. Jason's replies were always brief, measured, never showing a single crack or sign of guilt. He was the perfect grieving father to the outside world, and the man who kept his child in a freezer for 6 months. Carter walked out of the bullpen and paused when he saw me still sitting there. He approached, his voice softening. "You haven't gone home." I looked up, my eyes no longer glazed over. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" Carter didn't answer immediately. He sat down next to me, resting his arms on his knees. In this line of work, we never entirely believe anyone's statement, but we can't throw it out without evidence. "Do you see the glaring holes in his story?" I asked. Carter looked at me, his expression shifting. He was realizing I was no longer the broken woman from a few hours ago. "There are a lot of inconsistencies," he admitted slowly. I nodded, my voice even but sharp. "A child has a severe acute medical emergency. The father doesn't call 911, doesn't drive to the ER, chooses to hide the body instead. Doesn't that strike you as bizarre?" Carter let out a heavy sigh. "We're pulling his entire digital footprint from that day. Traffic cams, dash cams, toll pass logs, financial transactions. You need to look hard at his bank accounts," I said. Carter raised an eyebrow, clearly paying attention now. "What do you mean?" "I used to work as an investigator for a massive insurance firm," I told him. "I know that when people lie about a major event, they focus so hard on covering up the big obvious things that they forget the tiny details. Small transactions, a receipt, a coffee, run things that seem insignificant but accurately map out their exact behavior." Carter was quiet for a moment before nodding. "I follow." I stood up, smoothing out my shirt. "I don't want to just sit at home waiting for a phone call. I want in." "Absolutely not. You're a civilian. I don't need a badge. I just need to know what you find." Carter stared at me for a long time. "Are you prepared for that? Because if we keep digging, you might find things much uglier than what you saw today." I didn't hesitate. I looked him dead in the eye, and he must have understood. I had nothing left to lose. I didn't sleep that night. I went back to the house that used to be my sanctuary. Opening the front door, I was met with an eerie, deafening silence. Everything was exactly as it had been. The throw pillows on the couch, the dining table, except it lacked my daughter's laughter, and the presence of a husband I now realized had never truly existed. I walked into my daughter's bedroom. It was a small room with a pink twin bed. Her desk still held half-finished crayon drawings. Time in this room had stopped 6 months ago, frozen just like she was. I didn't cry. I sat down, opened her desk drawer, and pulled out the small sketchbook she always used. I flipped through the pages. The drawings were clumsy but vibrant. Then I stopped at a page I had never paid attention to before. It was a simple crayon sketch. A big house, an SUV, and 3 people standing next to each other. One was my daughter, one was Jason, and the third was a strange woman with long hair wearing a dress standing very close to him. I stared at the drawing, my heart accelerating. In every single drawing before this, she only ever drew a family of 4, me, Jason, and the 2 kids. There was never a third adult. I snapped a picture of the drawing and texted it to Carter with a short message. "Look at this." Less than 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Carter was calling, his tone strictly professional. "Where did you find this? In her room?" "I haven't touched this sketchbook since before she went missing." Carter paused. "We just got the preliminary traffic cam data back. Jason's SUV didn't head out toward the family fun center like he claimed." I gripped my phone tighter. "Where did he go?" "We're tracing the exact route, but there was a highly unusual stop on the West End near a very affluent gated community." I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. He might not have been alone. Carter didn't say anything, but I knew he agreed. I looked back at the drawing on my phone. The woman with the long hair standing next to Jason was a breadcrumb my daughter had unknowingly left behind. A crucial puzzle piece I had overlooked. For the first time, I realized my daughter's death involved more than just one person. I stood up, any trace of hesitation gone. I had a clear direction now, and I wasn't going to stop until the entire truth was dragged into the light. The next morning, I didn't wait for Carter to call. I drove straight to the precinct. My footsteps weren't stumbling like they had been yesterday. They were grounded, purposeful, because from the moment I saw that drawing, I knew I had lost the right to be weak. If I collapsed, the truth would stay buried, and my daughter would forever remain just a closed case file. Carter was standing in front of a murder board in the squad room. It was covered in printed traffic cam photos, a city map, and red lines marking Jason's route on the day of the incident. When he saw me walk in, he didn't look surprised. "Figured you'd show up," he said calmly. "I can't just wait around," I replied, staring at the map. Carter pointed to a spot on the West End. His SUV popped up on a plate reader in this area around 2:45 p.m. It disappeared from the grid for about an hour before showing back up on the main highway. "So he stopped there?" I whispered, though I was certain. "Yes. It's a high-end gated neighborhood, Westwood Estates. Private security cameras. We're requesting the footage, but it takes time to get the warrants processed." I stared at the name on the map. My mind immediately linked it to my daughter's drawing. The big house, the trees, the long-haired woman. It was all clicking into place. "Did you pull his bank statements?" Carter nodded, handing me a printout. "One transaction flagged. A payment at a local pharmacy just outside that subdivision. The timestamp matches the window his car was off the grid." I took the paper. My eyes locked onto the amount and the name of the pharmacy. Given my background in insurance, I knew medical transactions were the hardest to scrub if an unexpected event occurred. "I want to go there," I said. Carter frowned. "You aren't a cop, Laura. I know. But I know how people hide the truth, and I know how to spot the loopholes." A few seconds of silence passed before Carter sighed and nodded. "Fine. But you stick with me." We left the precinct immediately. The unmarked car drove straight toward the West End. Wide, perfectly paved streets, manicured oak trees, and sprawling mansions sitting far back from the road. It was a completely different world from the working-class suburb where we lived. The contrast made me feel even colder. I was beginning to realize Jason had an entirely separate life I knew absolutely nothing about. The pharmacy sat on a corner lot. It was small, but pristine. The pharmacist behind the counter tensed up the moment she saw a detective shield. Carter flashed his badge and asked to review a specific transaction from 6 months ago. I stood off to the side, staying quiet, watching the pharmacist's eyes and the way her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. I knew that sometimes the truth isn't in the data. It's in human behavior. Found it, she said, her voice slightly shaky. A male customer paid with a credit card. He bought emergency allergy medication. I stepped forward immediately. What kind of medication? She turned the monitor toward us, pointing at the line item. An epinephrine autoinjector. An EpiPen. Time seemed to suspend itself. My heart slammed against my ribs, not in pain, but because a massive puzzle piece had just slammed into its rightful place. So that day he bought the medication that could have saved her, I said, my voice barely a whisper but piercingly clear. Carter didn't say anything, but his demeanor shifted. I need the security footage from your store for that day, he told the pharmacist. She quickly pulled up the archived server. The grainy video loaded, and Jason's face appeared on screen. He looked frantic. His movements were jerky, urgent. He grabbed the bag, swiped his card, and practically sprinted out the door in under 2 minutes. I stared at the monitor. Every mannerism belonged to a man racing against the clock. That only happens when there's an active life-or-death emergency. Where did he go after he bought it, I asked. We're tracking the route now, Carter said. I didn't say anything else, but an even darker question loomed in my mind. If he bought the EpiPen, why did my daughter still die? We walked out to the car. Carter got on the radio, pushing the tech unit to expedite the security footage from the Westwood gated community. I sat in the passenger seat watching the sprawling estates glide by the window. If he wasn't alone, I said suddenly. Carter glanced over. What are you thinking? I'm thinking the woman from my daughter's drawing lives in one of these houses. Carter didn't dispute it. Instead, he asked, do you remember Jason ever mentioning anyone, a specific woman? I closed my eyes, digging through my memory. A blurry conversation surfaced. A long time ago, Jason had mentioned a parent of one of the students at the private school where he worked in administration. A wealthy woman who came by the office, often chatting with him for extended periods. Back then, I didn't care. I thought it was just school politics. There was someone. I opened my eyes, my voice dropping. But I don't know her name. Carter nodded. We'll pull the school's directory. The car kept moving, but I knew our trajectory had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just about Jason anymore. There was a second player. The woman my daughter had drawn. The woman who might have been there that day. The missing link to the entire truth. I tightened my grip on my purse, staring straight ahead. I was no longer a victim being dragged by the current. I was steering the ship now. That afternoon, when the police cruiser stopped in front of the massive wrought iron gates of Westwood Estates, I felt a bone-deep certainty about something I had never considered before. Jason didn't just have a secret. Life. He had an entirely different world. A world hidden so expertly that his own wife never even brushed against its edges. And this place, with its pristine cobblestone driveways and discreet high-end security, was where the secret of my daughter's death was buried. Carter got out first, flashed his badge at the gate guard, and demanded cooperation. I stood a few paces back, my eyes scanning the massive homes beyond the gate. A chill crept up the back of my neck, not from fear, but from the visceral instinct that I was inches away from the truth. Minutes later, the gate swung open. We drove slowly through the neighborhood. Carter checked the GPS coordinates against the plate reader data and stopped in front of a modern, angular mansion, tucked away in a cul-de-sac, shielded by tall privacy hedges. His SUV stopped here, Carter said, his voice low and firm. I didn't reply. I just stared at the front door. My daughter's drawing flashed in my mind. The big house, the trees, the long-haired woman. The déjà vu was nauseating. Carter rang the doorbell. A housekeeper answered, her eyes instantly wary at the sight of a detective. After Carter explained why we were there, she nodded tightly and led us into the foyer. The interior was stunning, dripping with wealth, yet it felt sterile. It lacked the warmth of a real home. Everything was curated to perfection, like a museum exhibit rather than a living space. Is the homeowner here? Carter asked. Miss Evelyn is out at the moment, but I can call her if you need, the housekeeper replied. Do that, Carter said. While we waited, I paced slowly around the grand living room, my eyes sweeping over every detail, the designer sofa, the abstract art, until I froze in front of a silver picture frame resting on a console table. It was a photo of a tall woman with long dark hair wearing an elegant dress standing next to a young boy. Her face was striking, but her eyes were remarkably cold. It was a beauty that demanded distance. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was her. The exact likeness of the woman in my daughter's crayon drawing. Recognize her? Carter asked, stepping up behind me. I nodded slowly. I think this is her. Before Carter could say anything else, the front door clicked open. The woman from the photo walked in, tall long hair wearing a sleek designer pantsuit. Her sharp eyes darted toward Carter, then locked onto me. For a fraction of a second, I saw her mask slip. It went from poised to guarded in the blink of an eye. I own the home. How can I help you, officers? She asked. Her voice was smooth but laced with ice. Carter introduced himself and got straight to the point. We're investigating a case involving a man named Jason. Do you know him? Evelyn paused, a microscopic hesitation that a normal person wouldn't catch. But I saw it because I had seen that exact same twitch in Jason. Yes, she replied seamlessly. He works at my nephew's school. Did you see him on the afternoon of? Carter listed the date. No, not that I recall. The answer came too fast. Too polished. I took a step forward, looking her dead in the eyes, my voice quiet but razor sharp. Do you recall a little girl in a yellow dress? The air in the room seemed to solidify. Evelyn stared at me, and for the first time, genuine panic flickered in her pupils. It was fleeting, but it was enough. I had hit the nerve. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, regaining her composure. Carter shot me a warning glance, signaling not to push too hard, then resumed his procedural tone. "We're going to need to review your exterior security cameras for that date." Evelyn hesitated for a few seconds before giving a tight nod. "Fine. But I'll need to see a warrant." "We're securing it now," Carter said. "In the meantime, we advise you not to leave the city." She didn't react, just gave a curt nod, but her eyes were no longer calm. We walked out of the mansion. As we reached the street, I looked back one last time. I could feel it. There was something massive, rotting behind those perfect walls, and I only needed to press the right pressure point for the whole thing to burst. "What's your read?" Carter asked once we were in the car. "She's lying," I said instantly. "Based on what?" The speed of her answers. Her eye contact. The way she sidestepped the specifics. That's the reflex of someone who rehearsed their lines. Carter was quiet for a moment. "If the warrant goes through and we prove his car was in her driveway, we'll have her on record." I nodded, but deep down I knew digital footprints wouldn't be enough. People like Jason and Evelyn didn't just hide things, they scrubbed them out of existence. As we drove away from the estates, the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised hues of purple and orange. The streetlights flickered on, but inside my mind, a blinding spotlight had just clicked on. I had a target. I wasn't going to stop just because of a lack of physical evidence. I had looked the second accomplice in the eye, and I knew she was the key. The ride back was silent, but the pieces of the puzzle in my head were rapidly snapping into a terrifying, cohesive picture. What sent a shiver down my spine wasn't just Jason's involvement, but how methodically he had prepared. Everything from his statements to his demeanor was perfectly engineered to write this off as a tragic accident, if it weren't for the tiny flaws he had overlooked. "We just got the preliminary ping from the HOA's gate cameras," Carter said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Jason's SUV definitely pulled into the neighborhood. The timestamp matches the pharmacy receipt." I wasn't surprised. Did the cameras catch anyone else in the car? Gate cameras only caught the plates, and the driver's silhouette. "We're waiting on the interior neighborhood feeds." I nodded, but I already knew the answer. The way Evelyn had reacted confirmed they were deeply entangled. Back at the precinct, we stood in front of the updated murder board. Between 2:40 p.m. and 3:30 p.m., Jason's car was in that subdivision, Carter said, tapping the timeline. Then he leaves, heads back toward the highway. "Which means whatever happened to my daughter happened in that 50-minute window," I said. My voice didn't shake. Carter gave a grim nod. Another detective handed him a fresh file. HOA resident records. Backgrounds included. Carter flipped through it and stopped on a page, handing it to me. "Take a look." It was Evelyn. Her occupation was listed as the regional director for a network of private urgent care clinics. Educated, wealthy, highly connected. Smart enough to never leave a messy trail. Evelyn, I murmured, testing the name on my tongue. It felt like I had just found the right key to a locked door. "Do you think she's directly responsible?" Carter asked. "No." Carter's eyes narrowed. "You're sure?" I looked at her glossy ID photo. Someone who can stay that composed in front of a homicide detective is either completely innocent or they knew we were coming. I don't believe in the first option. The room fell heavy. Everyone understood the implication. If I was right, this was no longer a case of a panicked father hiding a body. It was an orchestrated cover-up. "We're fast-tracking the search warrant," Carter said decisively. I nodded, but the agonizing question still gnawed at my brain. If he bought the EpiPen, if he had time, why didn't he save her? The question looped relentlessly until an entirely new, horrifying thought struck me. "I need to see the pharmacy video again," I said. Carter looked at me. "You already watched it. I want to watch it again. Frame by frame." They pulled it up on the large monitor. I stood inches from the screen, tracking Jason's frantic movements, walking in, swiping the card, grabbing the bag. "Pause it right there," I ordered. The image froze on the exact moment he grabbed the white paper pharmacy bag. I leaned in, staring at his grip, then turned to Carter. "Do you see it?" Carter squinted. A few seconds later, the color drained from his face. "He only bought one." "Exactly," I said. So a junior detective asked from the back. "I worked in insurance," I said. "People with severe anaphylactic allergies always carry 2 EpiPens. One for the immediate reaction and a backup in case the first fails or the paramedics are delayed. But he only bought one." "What does that mean?" The room was dead silent. I answered my own question. "It means he knew exactly who he was using it on." Carter stared at me, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "You're saying he had to make a choice?" I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just said I'm not stating it as fact yet. But if 2 people are going into anaphylactic shock and you only buy 1 pen, whoever is holding it gets to play God. The silence that followed was suffocating. "We need to prove that," Carter finally said. "I'll help you," I replied. Carter looked at me, and this time there was no hesitation. He saw me for what I was, a mother, tracking the scent of blood, hunting down the truth. I went home that night but didn't turn on a single light. I sat in the pitch-black living room, replaying every detail, every word, every twitch of an eye. The pieces were locking together into a picture so terrifying I almost couldn't stomach it. If my theory was right, my daughter's death wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And Jason was the one who made it. I gripped the armrest of the chair in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. There was only one thing left inside me, cold, absolute resolve. Sleep was impossible. Not because of the desperate insomnia that had plagued me for months, but because my mind was firing on all cylinders. I analyzed Jason's late nights, his secretive texts, his avoidance of eye contact whenever I brought up our missing daughter. I thought it was grief. It was guilt. At dawn, I drove back to the precinct. Carter was already there, a thick stack of files on his desk. He didn't ask how I was doing. He just pushed the files toward me. We got the HOA camera feeds. I opened the folder. High-res stills showed Jason's SUV pulling into Evelyn's driveway. And there she was, Evelyn stepping out of her front door to meet him. Is there any footage of my daughter? I asked, my knuckles turning white. No. Only exterior shots. Nothing inside the house. I expected that. Evelyn was a professional at covering her tracks. But this proved Jason lied about the family fun center. We brought Evelyn in for an interview, Carter said. What did she say? She admitted Jason came over but claimed it was to discuss her nephew's private school tuition. She flat out denied any child was with him. I let out a humorless laugh. She's stalling. What is she waiting for? Carter asked. I don't know. But people like her don't move until the chessboard is set. We're pushing for a warrant for her house, Carter said, but a judge wants more probable cause. I stared at the photos. I'll give you your probable cause. Carter's eyes narrowed. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to her. Absolutely not. I don't need a badge. I just need 5 minutes. Carter paced the room, rubbing his jaw. Do you realize who you're dealing with? A woman who was there the day my daughter died and is hiding something, I fired back. Carter let out a long breath. Fine, but I'll have an undercover unit parked down the street. That afternoon, I took an Uber to Westwood Estates. I dressed simply wearing jeans and a plain sweater, no makeup. I wanted to look like an insignificant grieving housewife. It would lower her defenses. I rang her doorbell. Evelyn opened it, surprise flashing across her face before she quickly masked it. You again. I want to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Yes, we do, I said, locking eyes with her. About my daughter. Evelyn hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. I walked into the freezing, sterile mansion. I didn't let the wealth intimidate me. I focused solely on her. What do you want? Evelyn asked, arms crossed. I want to know what happened that day. I already gave my statement to the detectives. I'm not a detective, I said. I'm the mother of the child who died. Evelyn's hands twitched a micro-expression. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't ask if you did. I asked what happened. Evelyn looked away, calculating. If you don't leave, I'm calling estate security. I didn't flinch. You know Jason bought the EpiPen. She froze. Her eyes snapped back to me. I also know he only bought one, I said, keeping my voice low and lethal. And I know that if 2 people need it, only one survives. Evelyn stared at me, then let out a sharp, cold laugh. You're smarter than I thought. I didn't blink. But what do you think you can do? She sneered, her mask completely off now. Do you have proof? Or just a wild imagination? I knew this was the turning point. She was testing the waters, trying to figure out what I actually knew. I don't need to prove it right this second, I said calmly. I just need to know the truth. And you know it won't stay buried. Evelyn leaned against an expensive armchair. Why would I say a word to you when you have absolutely nothing? I have my son, I said. And he already told a courtroom full of people something none of you factored in. That wiped the smirk off her face. Noah was the wild card they couldn't control. I'm not here to argue, I continued, pressing the advantage. I came to tell you the police have the footage of Jason here. They know he lied. It's only a matter of time before the rest of it unravels. If you stay quiet, you're going down as his accomplice. Evelyn frowned, her composure cracking. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you a chance, I said, before it's too late. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly in the heavy silence. I could see the gears turning in her head. She knew her empire was at risk. You should leave, she finally said, her voice strained. I nodded and walked toward the door. I'll be back. And next time I won't be asking nicely. I walked out into the fading daylight. I knew she was rattled. And a rattled target makes mistakes. Carter's unmarked sedan was parked a block away. I got in. Well, he asked. She's involved, I said. She knows exactly what happened. Carter put the car in drive. We just got a hit from financial crimes. Jason's accounts from 3 months prior to the incident show massive cash withdrawals and wire transfers to a Shell LLC. Who owns it? Carter handed me a sheet. I looked at the registered agent's name. Evelyn. The circle was closing. Jason and Evelyn had known each other long before my daughter died. We think he was being extorted, Carter said. By her. She was the middleman, Carter replied. I stared out the window. We need a motive. A reason why a father would let his child die, and why a woman like her would get her hands dirty. That night, poring over the financial documents, I realized it wasn't just about money. It was about leverage. I called Carter at 6 a.m. Who did Jason meet with the week before my daughter disappeared? Carter paused. Let me check. A minute later, he came back on the line. A guy named Greg, a former business partner from an old real estate venture. Greg went bankrupt and has been drowning in litigation. I need to meet Greg, I said. It's risky, Laura. I don't care. Set it up. That afternoon, Carter and I walked into a quiet diner off the interstate. Greg was sitting in a corner booth, a guy in his 40s who looked like he hadn't slept in a year. When he saw the detective, he looked like he wanted to bolt. I slid into the booth across from him. I'm Jason's wife. We have his bank statements. We know about the transfers. Greg swallowed hard, looking at Carter, then at me. I don't know what you're talking about. I know my daughter didn't die in an accident, I said, my voice cutting through the diner's ambient noise. I know it was a setup. Greg wiped sweat from his forehead. I just needed the money he owed me from a bad contract. I told him if he didn't pay, I was going to the feds about the fraud we committed together. Where does Evelyn fit in? I demanded. She's a fixer, Greg stammered. She brokers deals for people in trouble. She set up a scenario, an incident that would force a delay in the legal proceedings so Jason could liquidate assets without raising red flags. What kind of incident? My voice was a deadened whisper. A staged medical emergency, Greg confessed, looking at the table. Jason was supposed to trigger a mild allergic reaction in himself during a deposition. Buy us 30 days. The floor dropped out from under me. But the day he went to Evelyn's to get the concentrated allergen, he had the kid with him, Greg whispered. Something went wrong. The kid got into it. By the time Jason realized they were both exposed, he ran to the pharmacy. Greg looked up, tears in his eyes. He told me he only had enough money on that specific debit card, the one his wife didn't monitor, to buy one EpiPen without triggering a fraud alert on his main accounts. He panicked. I swear to God, I didn't know the kid died until later. The diner spun around me. Jason had staged a crisis to save himself from prison, accidentally poisoned his own daughter, and when faced with saving himself or her, he chose himself. And then he shoved her in a freezer. I stood up. Arrest him, I told Carter. The next 48 hours were a blur of warrants, sirens, and handcuffs. Greg flipped on Evelyn. Evelyn, realizing her pristine life was over, flipped on Jason to get a plea deal. I confronted Jason one last time at the precinct before he was transported to county lockup. He couldn't even look me in the eye. You chose yourself, I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed. I was going to lose everything. You, Noah, the house, my freedom, you already lost it, I said, and walked away. A few weeks later, I parked my car in front of the elementary school. The dismissal bell rang and Noah came running out, his backpack bouncing. He threw his arms around my waist. Is everything okay now, Mom? He asked, looking up at me. I knelt down and brushed his hair out of his eyes. Yeah, buddy. Everything is going to be okay. I didn't get a perfect ending. My daughter was gone. My marriage was a lie. But I had dragged the truth out of the dark, and I had protected my son. And for now, that was enough. And as the sun sets on tonight's episode, what lingers isn't just the shock of a heinous crime, but the heavy reality of how easily a supposedly normal family can be destroyed by a single selfish choice. If I were just narrating this from a distance, I wouldn't rush to judge the fragility of human nature. Jason was backed into a corner by his own past mistakes. In life, pressure, debt, and the fear of losing your reputation can push a person off the edge. But the price of playing God is always higher than what you're trying to save. You can lose your money, you can lose your job, but the moment you trade your family and your conscience for survival, there is no coming back. But for Laura, the mother at the center of this nightmare, I have nothing but profound respect. Not because she was some action hero, but because she chose to face the darkest, ugliest truth imaginable. Many would have chosen blissful ignorance to keep their family intact. She chose the brutal truth to protect her son's future. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the one that saved her soul. As for Greg and Evelyn, they were links in a chain of greed. A reminder that the collateral damage of white-collar crimes and backdoor deals often falls on the most innocent among us. For everyone listening tonight, there is a simple yet incredibly difficult lesson here. Slow down. Think about your choices, especially those that affect the people sitting across from you at the dinner table. Don't wait until everything has slipped through your fingers to realize what actually mattered. Life doesn't demand perfection, but it always gives us the choice to do the right thing. If tonight's story struck a chord with you, take a moment to reflect. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the Twilight Chronicles podcast, where we gather to tell, listen, and understand the profound, often hidden stories of everyday life. Because you never know, the story you hear tonight might just help you make the right choice tomorrow.